and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast. Bonus episode, a conversation with resilience and mindset coach and author Victor Giusfredi. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. In this bonus episode, you'll hear my conversation with Victor Giusfredi. He's the author of the book No Grail Without Dragons, a man's unconventional path to love, purpose, and peace. He tells his amazing story of the highs and lows of his journey and how he faced his dark night of the soul to where now he is on a love mission to empower men to thrive, to transform fear into power, and design their lives with purpose. And just as a heads up, this episode does make mention of suicide. So fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be one hell of a ride. It's the Men on the Path to Love podcast. Welcome, Victor, to Men on the Path to Love.
Hi, Bill. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you are definitely a man on the path to love, for sure, because that's part of the title of your book. Men on the Path to Love, I tell stories each time for each episode. So I always ask my guests to tell their story. And in your case, your book is your story. I mean, it's an amazing story, and we could probably be here for days. But please share your story with us, share your journey to where you've been and where you've gotten to today.
Thank you. And I'm flattered. The path of love has been my path ever since I can remember. I think I jumped on this path at somewhere around 11 for that need to be loved by someone else, accepted, and the feeling of belonging. And that's been my guiding star through all of the endeavors that I've embarked on in the last 20 something years. And that journey took me to live and work around the globe in about 50 places. I have dated hundreds of women worldwide, but from all ethical and socioeconomic backgrounds. And I overcame 2 divorces by 36. So this search for love has been a blessing and a curse because it's something that I felt a deep need to pursue. But my failures many times almost deter me from going back to an old path, or maybe even considering staying alone. But just the inability to scratch that itch, it's what forced me to find the solution to pursue love in all of its aspects, and then eventually stumble upon love in every single area of my life. And that's been what pushed me to write the book No Grail Without Dragons, because it's somewhere around May of 2021. I had already been divorced. My second divorce had already been about 2 years. And I had become the single parent of my 2 children full time. So by now I am engaged to who I'm still engaged with and getting married with too. But this night in May of 2021, I have an argument with her, and I am defending myself. And the conclusion of the argument is that she is leaving, that she is moving with her mom, and that was it. And to my dismay, I couldn't put the pieces together because I didn't know what had caused such results. So I exit the room, and now I had been wrestling with existentialism and as they call it, standing on the edge of the abyss, because so many failures after giving my best attempts were rather discouraging. And the fact that I hadn't found the key to make things work was even more desperating. So I sat on the couch and I considered taking my life, because at this point, it just seemed like a relief for everybody. It seemed a relief for me to stop suffering. It seemed a relief for my children, because now they were suffering from my bad choices. They had their mom away, and now another woman who they call mom was going to leave. So now it was going to hurt them again. So the thing that seemed the most reasonable was just to move on with my plan and use the money of my life insurance policy to help them. Maybe I will give it to my ex. Maybe she could buy a home and then live with my children and coast for a few years. So in a way, I accepted that death. I accepted that my life had been worthless, if you will, up until that point. And as I sit on that couch and I'm sinking in the couch, I start sobbing and I bury my face in my hands, and I start asking for forgiveness. I start asking for forgiveness mostly not about what I'm about to do, but for having been such a failure and having hurt so many people in the past. And in that moment, something happened that I can't explain because I still cannot explain the experience that I had. Up until that moment, I didn't believe in the ineffable. I didn't believe in anything invisible. I actually thought that if there was a higher power, that I wanted to find it and punch it in the nose because of everything that I had experienced up until then. But I had this experience, and within a blink of an eye, I experienced an epiphany, and I realized that more than money, the reasons I had suffered so much, it was ignorance. It was holding on to my ego, holding on to limiting beliefs, and just suffering from the dichotomy of control. So in that moment, I realized somehow that I had to write the book and that I have to share my map of experiences with my children, which was massive, and perhaps save them a decade or two of pain and trial and error so they can start building from where I left off. And the book evolved into a message for men just like us that are seeking that path to love. And in it, I detailed every single one of my experiences that led to that big aha moment, and every one of those mindset shifts that produced a big and massive change in the way that I experience life and eventually finding love.
Hmm. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And tell us more about what that experience was like that epiphany. What happened? What created that shift? Do you know?
You know, ever since that moment, especially because I didn't believe in God as the Westerners call it, and I had already saw answers through religion. I was raised in a Christian household, and from there I branched out into trying many different approaches to find the answers I saw. And each time I faced the wall, I abandoned that search and I embarked on a new one. So up until that point, I didn't believe in anything. Matter of fact, I was convinced that there was nothing else, that we were just a result of a Big Bang explosion and the product of evolutionary results. But having that face-to-face experience with something that I can't explain really shook me off my ground. And the first thing I did was consult with a psychiatrist because I said, if I have lost my mind, if I have suffered a psychotic breakdown or anything that I need to know about, well, I need to know, because then my children need somebody who they can rely on, because this experience really truly shook me off my feet.
Sure.
And the psychiatrist, to my surprise, she says, well, in my religion we call that a spiritual awakening. So that was the first hint of what it is I experienced. Then I consulted with a therapist that I had been working on. She's Christian, and she also said, well, maybe all you have to do is believe. And that led me into devouring psychology books, practical psychology, neuroscience, mythology, occult knowledge. And it just seems to be a realization of finding my purpose. And as Carl Jung will say, surviving the darkest night of the soul, finding the light on the other side of that threshold. And I believe that that's what happened to me. Better than that, I mean, what I can tell you is that in that moment, which I don't know how long it was because my eyes were closed, it was nearly midnight, and I'm sobbing in my hands. In that brief moment, I understood why I had endured such a traumatic and violent childhood, why I'd been a nomad, why I had succeeded and failed in business, and especially in relationships. And that's what flipped the coin for me. It allowed me to see that I had overcome such massive pain, and I was now at the threshold of helping other people do the same. So if I wasn't going to live for me, if I wasn't going to live for my own fulfillment or desire or pursuits, now I had a reason to help other people avoid the challenges that almost destroyed me. And in that moment, I experienced faith in at an atomic level, as more as a knowing than a doing, just knowing in my heart of hearts that everything had been perfect from the very beginning, and that it was going to be perfect until my last day, I suppose.
Mm. And that's a great way of looking at it because so many of us look at those so-called failures, or disappointments and see them as this totally negative thing. And when we can see it as a way to grow and to learn and to move beyond. And for me, those experiences have taught me, wow, I got through that. I can get through this and I can
Right,
get through anything.
right.
Yeah. And what struck me in your story about the psychiatrist and your therapist was that they both interjected that this could be a spiritual awakening or a situation for you where a lot of psychiatrists and therapists won't even go there. So I see that as an amazing part of your story is that with that support, I can imagine that helped you to carry on.
Yeah, and it was rather surprising because I wasn't expecting. I mean, this psychiatrist of mine, she had prescribed Zoloft for depression while I was going through the second divorce and being a single dad. Then she had prescribed Adderall for ADHD. And what happened is that after that moment, I stopped taking all of those medications because I also dug into how it is that they affected my body and they affected the different areas of the brain and therefore the consequences afterwards. So that was a big push on that end. But to hear someone whose job is to treat the psyche with medication tell me to go in the opposite direction, that was rather eye-opening. And it really gave me a foundation of realizing that I couldn't hold on to my ignorance anymore. To say, if somebody who spent their lifetime understanding this tells me to go in the opposite direction, then perhaps I might listen to it. And that's what I did.
Yeah, it's kind of going against the norm, and it sounds like it was kind of an awakening in itself.
Correct. That's definitely a shift. Absolutely.
So once you had this spiritual awakening or this epiphany, what steps did you start to take on your path?
My path changed completely. The first thing was that I knew I had to write the book. And I knew that the book had to have 33 chapters. And I also knew that each of those chapters had to be one of my firsthand experiences as a puzzle piece to reaching the bigger outcome. And how I was going to do that, I didn't know. I just simply knew what I had to do. So I abandoned my pursuit of other projects, such as looking for a job and running an online business. And instead, I dove into taking classes of the best writers in the world to learn how to write. And I committed to the writing process and I began writing the book as best I could. And then over the period of 2 years, I wrote 6 manuscripts and edited 5 times up until the result that we have today. So I believe I started with 120,000 words, and the book today is about 40,000 words. So, and in that process also, I dove into a lot of aspects of how the mind works and why we do the things that we do, and also how the dots connect between religion, science, mythology, and so on, because it's just been such a rabbit hole. Each time I stumble upon something interesting, and leads me in 1,000 other directions, and it's been a really great journey. Definitely based on faith. I have walked blind many times. I think I still do. Um, and also I've faced trials where if I stayed on this path, I could have lost things that I consider valuable to me, especially people, because at some point, well, first of all, many of my friends distance themselves when I actually sought to find confidence in them by sharing my experience because they knew me for so many years and they disappeared.
Wow.
And I only had one. But, because of that knowing, I couldn't go against this purpose that I'd been handed or given or discovered. And I stuck on that path. And just as in the movies, in the last minute, right when my nose is about to go under the water, I get lifted and things just work. And so it's been a really interesting repetition of patterns where I do something, I face a trial, I hold my faith, and I overcome it almost I wouldn't say magical, but it's almost definitely by a higher power more than what I can understand. That's for sure. And some deem it the subconscious, the unconscious mind, some deem it God. There are many definitions for it, but I think it's all the same.
Mm-hmm. When I heard you talk about your friends and you're kind of losing these friends, it's quite typical when someone's on a personal growth or spiritual journey that it can be a very lonely place because those folks that you used to connect with your old ways of doing things and your old patterns tend to start to drift away or fall apart, and you're kind of left alone, and it's that in itself is a huge growth in being able to have that faith, like you said, and that commitment, for that growth.
so that even losing friends and people that you were close to, as a result, it's like getting out of that energy to be who you are today. And that takes a lot of strength and courage to do that.
I agree. It did take strength and courage, but the difference is this. Previously, I pursued a career as a professional downhill mountain biker. And I went from being a recent immigrant in the United States to a semi-pro racer with sponsors. But then I quit. And then I pursued motocross and I pursued music and I recorded an album and I toured and then I quit. And I pursued money, I pursued achievement, I pursued businesses, I pursued inventions, but something along the way just didn't make any sense anymore. And I just abandoned it. When I faced the threshold to making it big, I realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do. But in this case, I cannot attribute it to my own courage and I cannot attribute it to my own strength, but only to that knowing that that is what I had to do. And because I considered that I did die, or a part of me died that night, I had resigned my life. And when I gave up life, when I gave up everything, my desire, when I just gave up completely, my purpose found me. And that's what I saw all of my life. The strength and the courage came from that understanding, of from that knowing. And that is the most entertaining part of this whole thing, because like I said, I've definitely faced challenges from that point until now, but no challenge has been bigger than that knowing and that feeling. And that's what's kept me on this. So I suppose it takes, I don't know what it takes. I mean, perhaps it takes courage and strength, but really it's my fire has been that knowing, that experience, and that I could not deny with anything. I mean, I've tried to rationalize it. Nothing has worked. I experienced what I experienced, and just knowing that is what pushes me forward. Also, the desire to help other people avoid suffering, because we are constantly wrestling with this Mr. Smith or the Joker or whatever the enemy is, right, in their hero story. And subduing that enemy, it's a beautiful thing, because that is the way to love. Overcoming that part of ourselves is the path to love. If one has to love shamelessly. And to love shamelessly, we have to be able to overcome our own prejudices of what loving is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, it's that inner knowing that creates that commitment to keep going. And I'm thinking about your darkest days and that night where you're sobbing in your hands and you're almost ending things. And if there's someone out there who is contemplating this right now, and you just can't make an epiphany happen, you just can't make this spiritual awakening happen. What do you say to that guy who is in that dark space?
You're right. You can't make it happen. To me, it was like getting smashed by a brick in the face. It just happened. But the truth is that along the way to that edge of the abyss, of staring into the abyss, I also knew that that wasn't the right thing to do. That something in me told me, something in me hinted that that's not the right thing to do. And that's the challenge, because we often lose to our rational mind. We lose to the mind that tells us you're not good enough. You've failed so much. How are you going to succeed? You've already been divorced twice. How are you going to make another marriage happen? And so that rational mind is our biggest enemy, because throughout the last couple of centuries, we have been indoctrinated to rely on this rational side of ourselves. But the truth is, everything in this universe happens by forces that we don't understand. And it doesn't matter how much technology we develop, we're likely more confused than before. I think recently science discovered a new breakthrough on what it is that creates reality, but now they found this element and now they're more confused than they were before.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how much you dissect the person, you can break them down to the atom, but they can't find what it is that makes us alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something to be said by listening to that intuition, listening to our instinct, and listening to, like in the little cartoons when we're kids, they have a little devil
Right,
and
right.
the
Devil and the
angel,
angel.
right?
Yeah.
And that's another breakthrough in my life, when I heard multiple psychologists, Carl Jung, Freud, the most recent Jordan Peterson,
Sure.
confirmed that that's an actual aspect of our lives, that we actually embody multiple personalities, and these personalities take shifts at how it is that we perceive the world and how we react to them. So understanding that it wasn't myself going back and forth, that it was two different parts trying to come to terms, that really helped me start listening to one more than the other and follow the path of instinct and intuition versus the path of logic that had led me to that dark point. So if anyone is going through this, the number one enemy is the way that you're talking to yourself and this rational mind who's desperate to know what's next. And because we don't know what's next, and the only thing that we can expect based on our past is pain, it seems rather easy to take that exit and say, I'll end my suffering now, and this will be it. But the other side is that if you are facing that dark night of the soul, you are cut from a different cloth, and it is your purpose to face that ultimate dragon or demon or enemy or arch enemy. And it is also your job to get back up and learn the techniques that you need to, like the hero does. The hero gets beaten a million times, sometimes down to the last breath, and he has a bigger why, and he gets back up and he learns the ultimate technique, and then he goes back and defeats the final enemy. And so it's to have hope, to trust in yourself, that your spirit cannot be destroyed except by yourself. So everything else that happens to you happens for you. And if you're facing that, just know that there's massive value if you flip the coin and you realize how you can help other people avoid what took you there.
Right. There's the other side, to always remember that there's the other side.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah, and what I heard you say too earlier in talking about all those pursuits, of the competition stuff you were doing and music and all those things, and it wasn't like hitting your soul. It wasn't satisfying your soul. And
it was
all
not.
those pursuits led to this opportunity to serve your soul.
I agreed. Yes, I got the hot girls from all the diversity that didn't fulfill that need. I got the cool cars, the convertibles, the sports cars, the exotic. That didn't. They actually became a burden. I traveled around the world. That became a burden. I embarked in the music business, and once I was living what I envisioned to, it became a burden. So you're right. Each time I crossed that, I realized how much of an illusion that had been, and that's why being found by my purpose, as I like to say it, because I can't say that I found it when I decided to give up. Right? I think my purpose found me. Then there's no reason to abandon it, because that's what I've pursued all my life.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing story, Victor. So I just want to ask you the first part of the title of your book, No Grail Without Dragons. You kind of touched on that a few minutes ago, but tell us how you came up with that title.
So one of my childhood heroes is Indiana Jones. and one of the movies that I remember was The Pursuit for the Holy Grail, which was this cup in which you drink and all of your issues absolve and you reach eternal life or immortality or whatever it is. And there are similarities between that Grail and the Indiana Jones movie and everything else that people talk about when they have sort of a transcendent mystical experience. Some call it nirvana, some call it salvation. In China, the experience is called NG because it's something that just happens to you. In Japan, it's called Satori. And to answer your question directly, I knew that I had to title it that at the moment that I wrote it. But the meaning behind it is that I couldn't have found my grail, which is love, which is this peace and this purpose, if it wasn't for having the willingness to get up every time I fell and try again against everybody's advice. If you would have heard my friends and my parents, they discouraged me in every single way possible they could have to pursue another relationship. They just thought I was a relationship failure.
Wow.
And the proof wasn't there for me to say, well, it makes sense to keep going, but something pushed me to do that. And so the title embodies exactly that. And that goes for all levels of what you might call your grail, from working out in the morning to reaching your purpose and finding your purpose. It's all a battle. It's all a battle with these invisible forces that usually hold us back. Procrastination, waiting for the perfect moment. I'll do it later. those are all little dragons, and we face them in different magnitudes as we face different challenges. Getting fired from a job is a dragon, and you could not work anymore, but well, you have to work, so you face the dragon and you get out of your comfort zone and you go and find another job. And you get dumped by your first or second or 10th girlfriend, and it hurts, and you wonder why, and you wonder if you're better off alone, but eventually you realize that you can't, and you go back and try to make it, like they say, make it work. And so that's why the title embodies.
Wow. And when I heard you say that about all these things, it's like it's really about going inside of you and what you really need, what your soul needs, your soul's purpose versus like what society expects from you or what your logical brain thinks you should be doing. And it may seem totally irrational, yet if it resonates in the soul, then yeah, that's where we got to go.
Yeah, and it takes practice. It's like
Sure.
it's similar to going to the gym. If you haven't worked out for all of your life and you go to the gym and you lift 5 pounds, you're going to be in a lot of pain and you might be discouraged to go back. But if you do go back, the 5 pounds of strength that you gave, which was all you had, now turns into 10. And then the 10 turn into 20 and the 20 turn into 50. And it's that constant perseverance of ours and that gift that we have as humans that we can grow through exposure. That allows you to conquer bigger challenges. I've done many foolish things in my life, like just quitting jobs without any backup or selling all of my belongings and vagabonding around the world, soul seeking. And it was then that I realized that we are truly supported by something else, that when we fall, we don't die. It hurts a little, but we get back up and we realize, okay, that's not the end. I think in the movie Fight Club, the saying is something like, it's only when you've lost it all that you're free to do whatever you want.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Victor, I tell you, your story is absolutely inspiring, and I hope some guys will take heed to what you're saying because it's just great stuff. And again, the name of your book is No Grail Without Dragons, A Man's Unconventional Path to Love, Purpose, and Peace. If someone wants to get this book or wants to work with you with your mindset coaching, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. They can visit my website, victorgiusfredi.com or nograilwithoutdragons.com. My book is available at every book retailer, online and physical. And for your audience, I would like to extend a free download code that I'll pass on with you, Purpose and Love. That'll be the code, and they can head out to my website, add it to cart, and it'll be a free download for them if they're interested.
Awesome. That's very generous of you, Victor.
It's my pleasure. It's the least I can do.
Awesome. Any last minute words you'd like to share with us before we part?
Yes, I will encourage you to pursue your passion, pursue what fulfills your soul, and realize that this life is way too short to live as a hostage of your rational mind. So just have faith in yourself and whatever it is that you believe in, and just pursue your highest goal.
Awesome, man. Well, brother, I appreciate you spending time with us and sharing your wisdom. And I wish you much success on your path to love, purpose, and peace, good brother.
Thank you, Bill. I'm honored and humbled to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
And that will conclude this bonus episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, a conversation with resilience and mindset coach and author, Victor Giusfredi. And once again, I thank Victor for being on the show today and for his openness and vulnerability to share his personal journey. It was truly inspiring. And if you want your free copy of Victor's book, you can go to his website at victorgiusfredi.com and you'll put in the code Purpose and Love, no D, Purpose and Love. And I'll have the website and that code in the show notes, so make sure you check it out. And if you or anyone you know may be contemplating suicide, immediate help is available by calling the Suicide Hotline. It's 988 and it's available 24/7. Once again, the Suicide Hotline is 988. Now, if you have an idea or topic for the show you'd like for me to cover, if you have any issues in your relationship you need support with, or just want to connect with me, simply visit my website where you can email me or set up a free call. Go to menonthepathtolove.com. You can also download my free cheat sheet, 5 ways to communicate better in relationship. You can get it at menonthepathtolove.com. And if you know someone you think might benefit from listening to this podcast, I ask that you please share the link and share the love. So until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.